Hey, tonight we're going somewhere quiet. Like, really quiet. Not just library quiet. Not even rainy afternoon nap quiet. We're talking about ancient China, where courtship was such a delicate, rule-bound ritual that entire romances bloomed and wilted before two people ever made eye contact. You might imagine a date as something cozy, maybe candles, laughter, some chemistry if you're lucky. But back then, your very presence on a date meant someone had already checked your family's ancestral scrolls for good omens. So yeah, romance was less flirty, more ceremonial, less "do you like sushi or tacos?" and more "please observe me from behind this expensive screen while I speak in rhymed couplets." And that's what tonight's story is about. So, dim the lights. Maybe light a candle, sandalwood if you've got it. Let your mind slip into silk slippers, step quietly past carved wooden panels, and prepare yourself for a kind of date where even blinking too loudly might be considered scandalous. Let's take you to a world of fans, formal beaux, slow-moving servants, and love so quiet you could miss it entirely if you weren't paying very, very close attention. Close your eyes. You're about to go on your very first date in ancient China. You don't know his name. You've been told, of course, whispered behind a half-closed door by your cousin who thinks she's being helpful. But names aren't what matter today. Today is about impressions, decorum, the first layer of a ritual that stretches back generations. Your maid has helped you into the pale blue silk robe reserved for important meetings. Not the red one. Red is for weddings. This one is faint as river mist, embroidered with a scattering of plum blossoms along the sleeves. It's supposed to suggest elegance, quiet virtue, blossoms that bloom early and never boast about it. Your hair is heavy with pins and combs. Not too many, you're not a courtesan, but enough to glitter gently if the sunlight happens to strike you from the right angle. You've practiced sitting without letting them rattle. Your aunt adjusts your collar one final time, tugs the edge just so, then nods as if to say, "Yes." You now look like a person who can be married off. And then she gestures to the folding screen. It's lacquered wood, taller than a man, with panels of paper that have been painted with a garden scene, peonies and cranes and a tiny stone bridge, curling vines where magpies perch. It is, ironically, quite beautiful for something designed to hide you. You take your seat behind it, quietly, knees tucked, hands folded, back straight, but not rigid. That part matters. You won't see his face. Not yet. This is the custom. A young woman sits behind a screen, modest and still, while the man, or more often boy, is allowed to sit on the other side and speak, or read, or recite something meant to impress. It's not exactly Tinder. It's more like auditioning for a play where both lead actors have to pretend they're not interested while their parents and half the extended family secretly take notes in the corner. You hear footsteps, soft, uncertain ones. Then the rustle of robes. Then silence. You can almost feel him sitting down. The screen does its job well. You can't see his eyes, or even his outline. Just a faint movement of shadow against the paper, like someone walking on the other side of a dream. Another silence. Then a breath. A light clearing of the throat. And then he begins to recite. When spring wind stirs the pear blossoms white, I think of one whose voice I've never heard. Behind the veil she waits, quiet as moonlight, a distant name, softer than a word. Oh, he's the poetry type. Of course he is. It's either that or Confucian philosophy, and frankly, you'd take moon metaphors over filial piety any day. You listen carefully while he reads 3 more stanzas. His voice is calm, well-practiced, and youthful in the way that boys' voices are when they're trying very hard to sound like men. It's not a bad voice. A little nervous, maybe, but not unpleasant. You think about how much effort he probably spent on choosing this poem. You wonder how many others he's read behind other screens. When he finishes, there's another silence. A long one. You're supposed to respond now. But what does one say in reply to a boy who just compared you to moonlight he's never touched? You let the quiet stretch for a moment longer, just enough to seem demure. Then, carefully, in a voice barely louder than silk rustling, "That was lovely. There, perfectly safe. Admirable restraint, even if your ears are burning." You can hear him exhale. Success. A servant brings tea. You don't see her, only hear the gentle clink as she places the cups between you. Two small porcelain bowls with no handles, steam rising lazily into the afternoon air. The fragrance is faint, chrysanthemum maybe, or osmanthus. You sip, slowly, never slurping. This is all part of the dance. On the other side of the screen, he sips too. You hear it. The tiniest pause in his breathing, the sound of pottery briefly touching wood. This might be the most intimate moment you'll ever share. You will sit like this for 20 minutes, maybe 30. He might say one more thing. A compliment, perhaps, about your brushwork, if he's seen your calligraphy, or a vague reference to shared values like harmony and loyalty. You might answer with something equally soft, something about the weather or the garden, but mostly you just sit. The two of you, separated by painted cranes and polite tradition, sipping tea while your families wait for signs of compatibility. Somewhere, a cicada whines. Somewhere, your aunt sneezes and then coughs deliberately, as if to signal that time is nearly up. You hear him stand. He thanks you, formally, politely, with a bow you cannot see. You return the words as you've been taught. Then he leaves. And that's it. Your first date. Not a word of affection. Not a glimpse of a smile. Not a stolen touch. Just poetry and tea and the heavy press of protocol. You remain behind the screen for a few moments longer. It would be improper to rise too quickly. Your knees ache a little. You study the painted magpie on the panel beside you and wonder, idly, if he painted it. You wonder if he liked your voice. If he thought your tea pouring was graceful. If his parents thought your posture meant you'd bear strong sons. Later, your aunt will ask what you thought. You will say, "He seems decent." She'll be thrilled. The matchmaker will note your approval. Your horoscope will be checked. Your family will consider his rice fields and reputation. And you, well, you'll quietly memorize his poem. Not because it was perfect, but because it was his. And because in this world, behind these screens, sometimes the quietest things are the ones that stay. Hey again. Still with me? If you made it through that first date, the one behind the folding screen, you already know that courtship in ancient China wasn't exactly built for butterflies or bold gestures. No sparks flying, no chemistry tests, just structured silences and recited virtues. But tonight's chapter digs even deeper into just how quiet, slow, and frankly disciplined romance had to be. See, in ancient China, you didn't just love properly. You also had to smile properly, and laugh properly, and blush at precisely the right angle so your in-laws would think your heart was pure but your liver was still strong. Yes, liver was connected to emotions, don't ask. Your facial expressions were almost as regulated as your wardrobe. So if you were lucky enough to actually be on a date, one with an audience of 5, of course, you had better not laugh too loudly, or at the wrong joke, or worse, at something genuinely funny. Because real laughter, that would be undignified. So tonight, let's drift back into that world. One where women are taught to curve their lips with exacting grace, and where love, real love, is so quiet it hides behind modest giggles and stiff posture. You're not allowed to laugh yet, not because there's a ceremony in progress, not because the master of the household is speaking, but because your aunt is watching you, closely. She's already corrected your hands once. You folded them too tightly. And now, as you smile faintly in the direction of your guest, the same young scholar from last week's screen visit, she clears her throat. Not loudly, but just enough for you to notice. You freeze, mid-expression. Her fan taps her palm. Once. That's the signal. Too much tooth. You adjust. You smile again, this time smaller, softer, The way she showed you in the mirror yesterday afternoon with a dried apricot in your mouth to practice the shape. The boy across the tea table is telling a story about the academy dormitory, something about a duck that wandered inside and wouldn't leave. You're not really listening. You're watching your aunt in your peripheral vision. She tilts her head, approves. You're allowed to chuckle, but only a little. There's a fine line between graceful amusement and loose character, and that line, apparently, is measured in decibels and duration. Earlier that morning, before the boy arrived, you were given a lesson, not in conversation, not in etiquette. You already knew those. This was a lesson in how to smile like someone worth marrying. Your aunt, third wife of your late uncle and self-declared expert on all things womanly, had summoned you to her room just after breakfast. She sat cross-legged by the window, dressed in pale silk with a single long hairpin carved from green jade. She didn't speak at first, just looked you over, eyes sweeping from your combed hair to your shoes. Then she said, quite seriously, "You laugh like a goose, girl." No man marries a goose. You had to cover your mouth to hide the very unladylike laugh that tried to escape. She narrowed her eyes. "I mean it." She pulled out a lacquered box from her side and opened it, revealing a small bronze mirror, a string of weighted beads, and a dried fruit. "Come, sit. I'll teach you the proper way." And so you spent the better part of the morning learning how to position your mouth so your upper lip barely moved, how to raise your brows slightly, but not so high that you looked surprised, how to let your eyes smile more than your teeth. You held the apricot in your mouth as instructed, rolled the beads across your palms to stay relaxed, and repeated her phrases. A wife is gentle. A wife does not cackle. A wife listens, then smiles. Never laugh before the mother-in-law does. By the end, your cheeks ached. She patted your head. Better. You felt like a puppet, a well-groomed puppet with elegant dimples and a strict performance schedule. Now, in the parlor, you sit across from the scholar while he tells another gentle anecdote. Something about calligraphy brushes being swapped by accident. It's not especially funny, but he looks so hopeful when he says it, like he wants you to find it charming. So you smile, modestly, exactly as practiced. Your aunt, from her seat beneath the window, fans herself twice. You've done well. Your maid refills the tea. The boy smiles back. Shy. Pleased. Perhaps he thinks you're clever for enjoying his joke, or kind for pretending to. Either way, the date continues. This is what dating looks like, not clever banter or late-night secrets, but sitting still, reacting with precision, and letting your entire emotional spectrum be compressed into 3 facial expressions and 4 well-timed nods. You wonder, not for the first time, how your mother met your father. She doesn't speak of it often. Only once she said that he made her laugh during a festival, but she had to cover her mouth with her fan, not because the joke was inappropriate, but because her aunt was nearby and might have mistaken genuine delight for loose behavior. Your father passed when you were little. You only remember his voice, and that it was warm. Warm, in a house where so much feels cold. You turn your attention back to the young scholar. He has nice hands, you think. Long fingers, careful when he pours his own tea. He's nervous, but he tries to hide it. You wonder if he practiced his stories the way you practiced your smile. You sip your tea slowly and pretend to find something amusing in the shadows cast by the paper lanterns, just enough to move your lips. He notices. He straightens a little in his seat. Progress. You're exhausted. From holding your spine tall, from keeping your feet still beneath your layered robes, from counting how long you can smile before it turns into something suspicious. You want to yawn, but that would be impolite. So instead, you imagine what it would feel like to really laugh. To laugh with your full face, with sound, with abandon. Would it feel like falling or like flying? You suspect both. Later, after the boy leaves, your aunt claps her hands with satisfaction. He liked you, she says. You smiled just enough. You thank her. She pours herself a small cup of rice wine and offers none to you. She's still smiling. You mustn't let men think you enjoy things too much, she adds. It makes them anxious. They start to think you'll be difficult. You nod. She picks up the dried apricot again, hands it to you. Practice again tonight. You take it. In the hallway, your maid whispers that the scholar left behind a small token, a folded slip of paper with a few brush strokes in blue ink. You tuck it into your sleeve without reading it yet. The day is nearly over. Tomorrow, perhaps, he'll come again. Perhaps he'll tell another story. And perhaps you'll smile again, this time with the right amount of teeth and the proper tilt of your head. Until then, you'll sleep on a wooden pillow and dream of laughter you're not allowed to have. And in that dream, maybe you'll laugh anyway. By now, you've probably figured out that dating in ancient China wasn't built for sparks or spontaneity. It was built for stillness, for family approval, for compatibility based on virtue, not vibes. In fact, it might just be the most anti-romantic version of romance you'll ever experience, which is why tonight we're looking at one of the most classic ancient Chinese dates of them all, the kind where absolutely nothing happens on purpose. No talking, no touching, no walking under lanterns or exchanging fans. You sit, he sits, a pot of tea steams quietly between you, and time stretches long and slow like silk unraveling in the wind. It's supposed to show how refined you are, how calm, how serene. But to the modern mind, it's the kind of date where you'd probably check your phone 5 minutes in, if you were allowed to have one. So go ahead and let your body sink deep into the pillows. Let your breathing slow. The story tonight won't rush you, or itself. Because in ancient China, love wasn't loud. It was quiet, excruciatingly quiet. Let's step into it. The tea table is carved from dark wood, polished until it glows like river stone in the lantern light. On one side, you. On the other, him. Between you, 2 porcelain cups, a clay teapot, and enough unspoken rules to fill a scroll. The teapot is steaming gently. That's the only sound. Outside, someone sweeps the courtyard gravel, a slow, rhythmic swish. Inside, a servant adjusts the folding screen behind you and bows before backing away. You glance at your hands. They're folded neatly in your lap. The sleeves of your robe are arranged just so, the silk embroidered with tiny cranes, wings tucked, eyes lowered. You are not to initiate conversation. He, technically, could. But he doesn't. He's studying the teacups. Or maybe the pattern on the table. Or maybe he's counting how many times he can blink before you blink back. 2 minutes pass. A servant pours tea. You nod in thanks. He nods too. That's it. You've been told what this is. The compatibility sitting. The idea is simple. If you can sit together in silence for a full cycle of the water clock, about 2 hours, without fidgeting, yawning, or breaking into an undignified comment about how nothing is happening, then maybe, you're a good match. Not because you talked, but because you endured together. They say this proves patience, poise, endurance. What it proves, mostly, is how skilled you've become at keeping a neutral expression for hours on end. He shifts slightly in his seat. You hear the rustle of his robe. He moves a sleeve back into place and rests his hand beside the teacup. Long fingers, pale skin, well-trimmed nails. He's definitely a scholar. You look down. Another servant pours more tea. This is your 3rd cup. It's grown slightly cooler each time. You sip because you're supposed to, not because you're thirsty. The tea itself is nice. A delicate oolong from Fujian, probably. Light, grassy, infused just right. You wonder if he even tastes it, or if he's just thinking about poetry, or rice quotas, or whether you're sitting with the proper posture. Your ankle's asleep. You don't move. You've trained for this, literally. Your cousin once made you sit for a full hour without speaking, just to test your stillness. You failed after 20 minutes when a bee landed on your hand. Today you will not fail. You stretch your toes inside your shoes, quietly. He clears his throat. You glance up, briefly. Your eyes meet. Then both of you look down again. Progress. A 4th round of tea arrives. The scent is changing now. The leaves are growing bitter. It's traditional, your aunt says, to end with a touch of astringency. Love, after all, must contain bitterness to be real. You think that's a lovely sentiment, also slightly ridiculous, but still, lovely. You wonder if he's thinking the same thing. It's hard to tell what he's thinking. His face is calm, not blank, just composed, like someone trying to memorize a painting. Every so often, he presses his thumb lightly against the edge of his cup. Not fidgeting, exactly, just marking time. You try not to stare. There is a story your grandmother used to tell about her first sitting. The boy she was paired with had sneezed halfway through, loudly. Everyone panicked. The servant spilled the tea. The matchmaker fainted. They were declared incompatible and never saw each other again. Years later, she still remembered how he had smiled afterward, apologetically, his eyes crinkling like someone who had never followed rules very well. She said he was the last one who made her laugh. You think about that story now as your fifth cup is poured. You do not sneeze. Neither does he. At one point, a breeze drifts in through the open window. It ruffles the edge of the calligraphy scroll hanging behind him. The characters sway slightly. Something about virtue and stillness, you think. You've read the same quote in your father's study. The ink is bold, precise. You wonder if he wrote it. You wonder if he hopes you'll ask. You don't. You sip instead. You've reached the halfway mark. A servant adjusts the sand in the water clock just outside. He hears it too. You both glance toward the door, then back down. You let yourself blink slowly. He blinks too. It feels like a kind of conversation. At minute 67, something strange happens. He smiles, just slightly. It's not at you exactly, but not at you either. You try not to smile back, but your mouth curves the tiniest bit. A courtesy smile. Or perhaps a shared joke, a silent one. The kind that says, "This is ridiculous. Yes, but we're doing well. I think I like your sleeves. I think I like the way you sit still." And then it's gone. Back to serenity, back to silence. By the time the water clock sounds, a faint clink as the last drop falls, the teapot is empty. Your legs are tingling with pins and needles. Your mouth is dry, your spine is slightly sore. But you've done it. You sat. He sat. Neither of you ran, laughed, spoke out of turn, or broke the rhythm of this ancient, quiet dance. You bow slightly. He returns it, deep and slow. And then, with a rustle of silk, he stands and exits. You remain seated for another few minutes. You're not sure why. Maybe to give him space to leave. Maybe because standing feels too abrupt, like it would break the spell. Maybe because, for just a few seconds, you liked the feeling of someone across from you, doing nothing, together. Later, when your maid helps you out of your robes, she asks what it was like. Boring, you say, but softly. Because it wasn't just boring. It was something else. You remember that small smile. You wonder if he'll smile again next time. You wonder if sitting with him forever might not be so terrible after all. And then you yawn, because you've never felt so tired from doing so little. So far, we've survived a poetry recital from behind a folding screen, a crash course in how to smile without looking suspicious, and a date so silent it could double as a meditation retreat. And tonight, we're dressing up. Ceremonial silk, embroidery so fine it's stitched with threads thinner than a strand of hair piled high, makeup dusted like mist, everything perfectly arranged for someone else's eyes. But that's the catch, isn't it? In ancient China, the outer layers were everything. Robes, posture, bows, family names. You could fall in love with a person's sleeves before you ever knew their voice. And even when they were looking right at you, they never really saw you. So tonight, let's wrap you in silk, 3 layers thick, and see what it feels like to look perfect and still feel invisible. Ready? Let's return. The first robe is plain, off-white, light as breath. It's the base layer, the one no one will see, except your maid who helps you fold it around your shoulders, murmuring quietly about the weather. The second robe is pale lavender, embroidered with clouds in pale silver thread. It rustles softly as you move. It smells faintly of the cedar chest where it's been stored for years, your mother's robe once, passed down for this exact occasion. The third robe is the one that matters. Deep blue, nearly black, with borders trimmed in gold. Tiny cranes stitched along the sleeves. When you move your arm just slightly, it shimmers like dusk. It is beautiful. It is heavy. It does not feel like it belongs to you. You sit before the mirror while your hair is twisted into shape, looped, pinned, twisted again. One comb, one dangling ornament with a bell that chimes faintly when you move too fast. You're not supposed to move too fast. Your cheeks are dusted pale, your lips tinted with crushed flour paste. You know the look is meant to flatter, but as always, the transformation feels like a mask, like being dipped in wax and left to dry. Your aunt steps into the room, eyes scanning you top to toe. She nods. You're ready. But you don't feel ready. You feel cold. In the outer hall, he's already arrived. You hear his voice, low, polite, offering greetings to your father. You wait, hidden behind the partition, just as you've been taught. A servant announces you. You step forward slowly, robes whispering across the floor. He bows. You bow. Then both of you sit on either side of the ceremonial tea table, just as before. A formal occasion this time. A second meeting. The kind that means something. A chaperone sits in the corner, silent and unobtrusive. But there. You can feel her presence like a weight. He's wearing ceremonial robes, too, dark red with clean, geometric patterns. He looks older today, or maybe just more serious. His hair is tied in the formal style, and he sits with the kind of posture that suggests he's been practicing. You think you almost recognize the curve of his mouth from behind the folding screen. He glances at your sleeves. Your embroidery is exceptional, he says. You incline your head in thanks. My aunt selected the robe, you reply. He smiles faintly. It suits you. You say nothing, because the robe isn't yours. And it doesn't suit you so much as it suits the version of you someone else decided was appropriate. The poised, quiet, softly radiant version. Not the one who snorts when she laughs, or whose toes ache from walking barefoot in the garden after the rains. You wonder what he would say if he saw you with your hair down, if he saw your face first thing in the morning, before the powder, before the layers. Would he still compliment you? Would he still look at you the way he's looking now? Tea arrives. Of course, ceremonial this time, poured with slow, exacting gestures by your maid, who's practiced every motion until it looks like part of a dance. You reach for your cup at the same time he reaches for his. Your fingers pause, nearly touching. Neither of you reacts, just a flicker of breath. Then you both retreat. The conversation is soft and proper. He asks about your favorite verses. You mention a Tang Dynasty poet, not the most popular one, but safe. He nods appreciatively, quotes a line. You recognize it. Pretend you don't. He asks if you play the guqin. You say yes. You ask if he enjoys painting. He says no, but that he admires those who do. You sip tea. He does the same. A breeze stirs the silk of your outer robe, and you shiver before you can stop yourself. He notices. Are you cold? You open your mouth to say no, but instead, a little. He gestures toward the nearby brazier. A servant adds more charcoal, and then, almost gently, 3 layers of silk and still cold. How strange. You smile. The real kind, the untrained one. It happens. He nods, and says nothing more. You sit like that for a while, speaking in slow, measured tones. Neither of you dares ask anything real. Not about favorite foods, or whether he snores, or whether you sometimes sneak rice cakes after dark. Not about the future, not about the parts of yourself that ache beneath all this silk. At one point, he glances toward your cheek, not inappropriately, not directly, just thoughtfully. You wonder what he sees: the powdered face of a dutiful girl, a possible wife, a stranger behind a layer of fabric and formality. He doesn't say. You don't ask. When the time comes for the sitting to end, he bows once more. You bow too. The chaperone clears her throat, a soft cue. You rise. Your legs feel stiff. Your robe feels heavier. Your hands are cold again. He watches you go, not boldly, not intimately, just politely. And as you disappear behind the partition, you think, he saw the outer robe, he liked the embroidery, but not once did he say anything about you. Later, alone in your room, your maid helps you unfasten the outer robe. It slides off your shoulders and pools on the floor like water. You stand in the second robe, lavender, lighter, softer, and suddenly you can breathe again. You look into the mirror and touch your bare cheek, not for vanity, just to remind yourself that underneath all this, there's still skin, still warmth, still someone waiting to be seen. So far, you've survived sitting still for hours, smiling just enough to pass as marriage material, and dressing in layers so ornate they could serve as their own architectural structures. And now, it's time for the next level of ancient Chinese dating, philosophical performance. Tonight, your suitor won't be telling jokes. He won't be complimenting your hairstyle or asking about your dreams. No, tonight is about virtue, quoted, recited, performed. Because in ancient China, a man didn't win your heart by baring his soul. He won your father's approval by quoting dead men flawlessly. So, get ready. Tonight, your date is less a conversation and more a lecture. Let's step back into it. It begins with a bow. It always does. You're dressed in pale green today, a modest robe with stitched bamboo leaves at the hem. The light color was your aunt's idea. Something scholarly, she said with a satisfied smile. He'll feel encouraged. Encouraged to do what, exactly, you weren't sure. Until now. Because he hasn't even sipped his tea yet, and he's already begun to quote the Analects. The master said, "When you see a worthy man, think of how you may become his equal. When you see an unworthy one, examine yourself." You nod. Not because you agree, but because that's the correct response. Your hands remain folded in your lap. Your expression is composed. Inside, you're wondering how long he can keep this up. It's not that you don't like Confucius. You grew up hearing his words, stitched into proverbs, scribbled in the margins of your textbooks. His voice is as familiar as rain on the roof tiles. Steady, repetitive, comforting in the way dry logic often is. But tonight you're tired, not physically, emotionally. Tired of being the silent half of these conversations. Tired of pretending that all this means something. The master said, "To govern is to correct. If you set an example by being correct, who would dare remain incorrect?" He says it with such earnestness. You sip your tea, you smile, the polite one. You wonder if this is how it will always be. Him quoting, you nodding, forever. A servant replaces the tea. You switch to chrysanthemum now, light and floral, but you hardly taste it. You're too busy trying to stay awake while he recites a passage about filial piety. The master said, "Filial piety now means being able to feed one's parents, but even dogs and horses are fed. Without reverence, what's the difference?" You pause. That one's actually kind of clever. You almost smile, genuinely, but catch yourself. You look down, and he misreads your silence as depth. He nods approvingly, and moves on to Mencius. You've lost count of how many quotes he's recited. He pauses sometimes, as if to gauge your reaction. You give him the same nod each time, just shy of enthusiastic, gently thoughtful. Your aunt would be proud. But your mind? It left 20 minutes ago. You're thinking about how odd this whole thing is, how these dates are never about you or him, but about staging the idea of compatibility. He recites, you nod. You play the part of a virtuous listener. He plays the part of a moral scholar. Neither of you says anything real. You imagine what would happen if you interrupted. If you leaned forward across the table and whispered, do you ever feel lonely? Or, what's the last thing that made you laugh so hard you cried? Or even, do you dream of something else too? But instead, he's quoting again. Something about sincerity and rulers. You blink slowly and think about clouds. At one point, you notice the way his voice dips slightly when he gets to the end of each phrase. There's a rhythm to it, like calligraphy strokes read aloud. You find yourself lulled, not moved, just softened, like warm wax. Your eyes drift to the hanging scroll on the wall behind him. A mountain landscape in ink, mist, tiny figures walking along a cliff path. You focus on the smallest figure, the one near the waterfall. She looks like she's going somewhere. Eventually, he runs out of steam, or breath, or maybe just pages. He stops, looks at you. You realize he's waiting for you to say something. Your throat catches. You scramble for something safe. Your knowledge is impressive. His chest lifts, just slightly. He bows his head in thanks, a perfect exchange. Later, after he's gone, you sit alone at the table. The tea is cold. Your maid collects the empty cups, glancing at you sideways. Well? She asks. You shrug. I remember none of it. She laughs, the quiet, shared kind, the kind that would be inappropriate in front of your aunt. She packs the scrolls, gathers the robes, and then helps you to your feet. Your back aches slightly from sitting straight for so long. In your chamber, you remove your robe and sit by the window. The moon is full tonight, floating above the tiled rooftops. Somewhere below, another young woman is probably listening to her own suitor quote the same lines, nodding, smiling, pretending to remember. You wonder how many women fell in love with the idea of a scholar, and not the person beneath all the quotes. You wonder how many men knew what to say, but never what to feel. You press your forehead to the window pane. It's cool against your skin. You whisper a line to yourself, not from Confucius, but from a folk song you once overheard in the market. He said so many things, but none were about me. You've been such a good listener so far, smiling on command, nodding at the right phrases, keeping your spine tall and your hands soft and your opinions carefully tucked away. And tonight you're not expected to speak at all. He's playing the guqin, the seven-stringed zither known for its elegance, complexity, and spiritual subtlety. It's not meant to be flashy, or loud, or catchy. It's meant to be refined, ancient, intellectual. The sound of cultured silence, expressed through vibrating silk strings. It's also incredibly slow. So slow, in fact, that if you're not fully awake, your mind begins to wander. If you're seated too comfortably, your eyelids begin to drift. And if you've been drinking tea all day and listening to Confucian proverbs for hours, well, you might just fall asleep. Let's step into tonight's romantic date, where the only thing more delicate than the music is your struggle to stay conscious. You're seated on a low cushion again. This room is new, one of the formal salons in your uncle's estate. High windows, carved lattice screens, a silk rug beneath your knees that smells faintly of dust and lavender. He enters already holding the guqin, long and dark and polished, cradled in both arms like a sleeping child. He bows. You bow. Your chaperone sits behind a screen. There, but silent. Two maids stand nearby with teacups ready. One of them yawns behind her sleeve. You wish you could do the same. He sits cross-legged on the raised dais. The guqin rests across his lap. He adjusts the tassel on his sleeve, takes a breath, and begins. The first note is soft, not plucked so much as coaxed from the string. A long pause follows, then another note, slightly higher, then silence, then the same note again. You blink. You're not sure if you're supposed to be feeling something yet. The melody is slow, painstakingly so, the kind of slow that makes you painfully aware of your own breathing, of how your right foot is beginning to tingle, of how warm the tea made you feel just 5 minutes ago, of how still the air is in this room. You glance at the ceiling and immediately regret it. The latticework pattern is dizzying. You bring your eyes back down. He's still playing. Or is he tuning? It's hard to tell. There's a story your aunt once told you about a famous guqin player who could make a tree weep with just 3 notes. You're not weeping. You're just blinking a lot to keep your eyes open. And when you do close them, only for a second, just to rest them, really, you hear the next soft note and it startles you awake again. You adjust your posture, straighten your spine, flex your toes inside your slippers, bite the inside of your cheek a little. Across the room, he's still deep in concentration, brows furrowed, lips pressed, fingers trailing across the strings like wind brushing water. It's all very poetic. Everyone says so. You're sure your aunt will say it was the most romantic performance she's ever witnessed. But right now, you're battling the slowest kind of sleep, the kind that creeps up gently, disguised as serenity. Another note glides out, vibrates, then vanishes. You sip tea quickly to distract yourself, but that just makes you warmer and sleepier. You try to focus. You really do. You fix your eyes on the instrument. Watch the curve of the wood, the way his fingers hover, then descend, the way he closes his eyes between each phrase. He's not rushing, not even slightly. Every phrase is a meditation, which would be fine if you weren't starting to sway. You nod forward slightly. Catch yourself. Your maid notices. Her eyes widen a little, but she says nothing. He doesn't notice. He's lost in his own rhythm. You pinch your palm. A full minute passes. Another. Still, the notes continue. Software airy. Melancholy. He's playing something called Flowing Water, maybe. Or 3 variations of Plum Blossom. They all sound like clouds drifting slowly across a pale sky, which is exactly what your mind is doing. Drifting, floating, leaving. You imagine being in a boat, one of those long, narrow ones drifting down the canal. The music becomes the paddle, gentle, rhythmic. The water is smooth. You're lying in the back, head resting on a folded robe, sun on your cheeks. The man rowing never speaks, but his fingers are kind. You jolt upright. You nod it off. Just for a moment. You glance around, mortified, but no one reacts. The chaperone remains still behind the screen. Your maid adjusts your sleeve as if nothing happened. Even he, the musician, seems unaware, too absorbed in his performance. You breathe and pretend you were reflecting deeply on beauty, on form, on the transience of music, anything but sleep. Finally, the last note arrives. It lingers, suspended. He lets it fade fully before lowering his hands. Silence. You bow your head in appreciation. He returns it. And then, mercifully, he sets the guqin aside and speaks. I hope the music was soothing. You manage a smile. It was very soothing. He beams. He doesn't know. Or maybe he does and chooses not to mention it. That's something you're learning about him. He doesn't mind letting silence cover small imperfections. After he leaves, your maid helps you up from the cushion. Your knees crack softly. She leans close. You were nearly gone, she whispers, amused. You sigh. I was dreaming about boats. She grins. Romantic ones? You shrug. I'm not sure. There weren't any oars. Back in your chamber, you sit by the window again. Same moon, same rooftops, same quiet ache. You press a hand to your chest and wonder why it feels like something's missing. Not from him. From all of it. The poetry. The robes, the smiles, the silence, the tea, even the music. You know it's beautiful. But why does it all feel like something you're watching instead of living? You close your eyes. The melody returns in your memory, soft, slow, mournful. You still don't know what he played, but you remember the sound of almost falling asleep. And maybe that's enough. The girl behind the screen, the quiet listener, the ornamental presence nodding at the right moments while he quoted the sages and played mournful strings into the candlelight. But tonight, you're the one on display. Because in ancient China, love, or something that looked like it, required mutual performance. And tonight's date isn't just a meeting, it's a tea ceremony, the kind where you, the maiden, get to showcase your grace, serenity, and domestic aptitude. But don't get too excited, because this isn't an intimate little moment between just the two of you. Oh no, there are 5 elders seated along the back wall. His grandmother, your great-aunt, a distant uncle who hasn't spoken in 3 years, and 2 family friends with nothing better to do. You're pouring tea for him, while they judge every blink and breath and flick of your sleeve. So pull the sleeves back, adjust your kneeling cushion, and take a deep breath. Let's begin the quietest performance of your life. The tea is already steaming. You prepared it yourself, twice in the side room, just to make sure the temperature was right. Longjing leaves, water-cooled to the perfect warmth. Not boiled, never boiled, just steeped, carefully, so the leaves open slowly like tiny green fans. You carry the tray in with both hands, arms extended just enough to show form, but not so much that you look like you're trying too hard. Your slippers whisper over the floor, silk over tile. You can hear your heart louder than your steps. He rises slightly from his cushion, bows. You bow in return. Your robe is pale apricot today, chosen to make your skin look warm. Your hair is pinned high with a single comb, no dangling ornaments this time. You're meant to look serene, not flashy. The 5 elders watch in silence. Their presence hums behind you like a second heartbeat. You kneel before the low table. The girl behind the screen, the quiet listener, the ornamental presence nodding at the right moments while he quoted the sages and played mournful strings into the candlelight. But tonight, you're the one on display. Because in ancient China, love, or something that looked like it, required mutual performance. And tonight's date isn't just a meeting. It's a tea ceremony, the kind where you, the maiden, get to showcase your grace, serenity, and domestic aptitude. But don't get too excited, because this isn't an intimate little moment between just the two of you. Oh no, there are 5 elders seated along the back wall. His grandmother, your great-aunt, a distant uncle who hasn't spoken in 3 years, and 2 family friends with nothing better to do. You're pouring tea for him, while they judge every blink and breath and flick of your sleeve. So pull the sleeves back, adjust your kneeling cushion, and take a deep breath. Let's begin the quietest performance of your life. The tea is already steaming. You prepared it yourself, twice, in the side room, just to make sure the temperature was right. Longjing leaves, water cooled to the perfect warmth. Not boiled, never boiled, just steeped, carefully, so the leaves open slowly like tiny green fans. You carry the tray in with both hands, arms extended just enough to show form, but not so much that you look like you're trying too hard. Your slippers whisper over the floor, silk over tile. You can hear your heart louder than your steps. He rises slightly from his cushion. Bows. You bow in return. Your robe is pale apricot today, chosen to make your skin look warm. Your hair is pinned high with a single comb. No dangling ornaments this time. You're meant to look serene, not flashy. The 5 elders watch in silence. Their presence hums behind you like a second heartbeat. You kneel before the low table. The tray is placed gently. The cups, 3 of them, arranged like a painting. The central one for him. The others for your chaperone and for ritual balance. You pour the water, not too fast, not too slow. The stream of water is silent, steady, graceful. Your fingers are curved, your wrists soft. The movement is one you've practiced for weeks, months even. A single sharp gesture could ruin the illusion. He watches without blinking. When the final drop lands, you lift the pot in a smooth, breath-like motion and bow your head. He bows in return and says softly, "Thank you." That should be the end of it. But then, from the back of the room, your grandmother clears her throat. "You tilted your wrist too far inward," she says, voice calm, but sharp enough to slice through silk. "It spoils the line." A pause. No one breathes. Then your great-aunt joins in, as if on cue. She also paused for a breath before setting the cups. A proper girl finishes the movement in one exhale. You stay kneeling, still bowed, because there's no correct reply. Only quiet shame. Your suitor, to his credit, pretends not to notice. He sips the tea with grave sincerity. He does not comment on your wrists, or your exhale, or the tiny tremor in your fingers just before the water touched the rim. He simply says, "The tea is excellent." Another bow, another silence. The elders murmur to each other, not cruelly, just thoroughly. Like judges at a flower arranging contest, detached, analytical. Some nod, one frowns. You keep your eyes lowered, even as the heat rises in your cheeks. It isn't that you mind being corrected. You just wish, for once, it mattered less. That the taste of the tea meant more than how your elbow hovered. That the scent rising from the cup was more important than the angle of your chin. That he had smiled, just once. Like maybe he saw you and not just the performance. When the last cup is drained, you gather the tray. He bows again. "Thank you," he says once more. "It was an honor." You bow lower. Not because you feel honored, but because that's what girls do when they're being quietly inspected by 7 generations of expectations in the shape of old women. Back in your room, your maid helps you undress. You peel off the apricot robe, the smell of tea clinging faintly to the sleeves. "Your wrist was fine," she mutters. "Better than mine ever was." You smile faintly. "I was shaking. Didn't show." You sit at your mirror and rub your wrists, not because they hurt, but because they feel like they're no longer yours. You wonder if he noticed the tea leaves unfurling just right, if he even likes tea, or if he drank it because he was supposed to. Your grandmother appears in the doorway later that night. She says nothing at first, just stands there, arms folded, lips pursed. Then, "When I was your age, I dropped an entire teapot on my future husband's lap." You look up. She shrugs. "He still married me," and leaves. That night, you dream of pouring tea in a room with no walls, just you, and someone across from you whose name you never learn, and no one watching, and the tea never spills, and you tilt your wrist however you like. You've poured tea with perfect wrist posture. You've smiled through music, nodded through quotes, and worn silk like it was armor. And maybe, just maybe, after all that effort, you thought something might shift. That all the small performances might have meant something. But in ancient China, a young man didn't rush. And romance, if it came at all, came in the form of ink, a poem, a few lines. Delicate, precise, composed on a scroll and delivered by messenger. Nothing too forward, just a suggestion. A whisper, that he was thinking of you, that something stirred. But then the first day passed, and then the second, and still, nothing. So now you're just waiting, wondering, listening to the silence between notes and trying to decide if it means anything at all. Let's return to the story. It starts with hope. You wake the morning after the tea ceremony, half expecting a scroll tucked inside a red sleeve, or tied with golden thread, or carried in the hand of a servant trying not to smile. It's tradition, after all. The guqin was played, the tea was poured. There was bowing, soft words, sips from the same cup. And though the elders picked at your wrist like it was a fault in porcelain, The look in his eyes, that brief one, right before he thanked you, felt real, didn't it? Maybe? By mid-morning, you've already looked out the window twice, just casually. The path is quiet. The garden is being swept by an old man with a straw broom. A bird sings. A servant walks by with a tray of rice cakes. Not for you. You smell sweet bean paste and sesame. Still no scroll. You go about your chores, embroidery, reading, sitting. But your mind drifts. Every time you hear footsteps in the hallway, your breath catches. Not that you're waiting exactly, just aware. You imagine how it might arrive. The maid gently knocks, hands you the message like it's fragile. You open it carefully. Inside, a poem. Just a few lines. Something about your robe, or the scent of jasmine, or the sound of your voice when you said, "Thank you." It doesn't even have to rhyme. You'd memorize it anyway. By afternoon, there's still nothing. You don't say anything to your maid, but she notices you checking the front gate from the veranda. "Too early," she says. "He's probably still picking the right words." You nod. Of course, the right words take time. You return to your sewing and stab the thread through the silk too hard. It knots. You sigh. The bird in the garden stops singing. Day 2. You wake with a flutter of anticipation that you crush before your feet even hit the floor. You tell yourself not to expect it. But part of you still listens for the sound of paper crackling in a scroll tube. Breakfast is quiet. Your grandmother mutters something about vinegar in the pickled radish. Your father says the weather's turning. No one mentions poetry. At midday, your cousin arrives with stories from the market. She chatters about fish prices and a man who fell off his donkey. You smile politely, but your ears are tuned to the courtyard. Still no steps. Still no message. You wonder if maybe he wrote something and lost it, or if he sent it and the messenger got turned around, or maybe he was told not to write at all. Maybe the elders didn't approve. Maybe you bowed too deeply, or not deeply enough. Or maybe the wrist thing really mattered. By evening, the air turns cool. You walk the garden path in your inner robe, arms folded. The moon is low. The cicadas have begun to hum. A thought settles in your chest. Maybe it's not coming. Not today. Not ever. Day 3. You stop looking, not out of strength, out of fatigue. You sit on the veranda and peel fruit. Feed the slices to your sister's cat, who blinks at you with indifferent gratitude. You try to write a poem yourself, something light and dry, about fish and shadows and things you won't say aloud. It's awful. You crumple the page and toss it into the brazier. The cat doesn't flinch. Your maid sits beside you with her mending. She doesn't ask. She just hums a tune that your mother used to sing. It makes you feel 5 years old again, safe and small and powerless in a way that somehow comforts you now. That night, your great-aunt comes to sit by your bed. "I once waited 7 days," she says. "He finally sent a flower, pressed between 2 pages. Not even a note." You glance at her. "Did you marry him?" "No," she says. "He married a merchant's daughter from the city, but for a while I liked imagining he might." She pats your hand, then leaves. You stare at the ceiling. The shadows look like cranes in flight. You close your eyes and wonder if maybe silence was the poem. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Or maybe he said it all. When he bowed, when he sipped your tea, when he looked at you and said it was an honor. And that was it. Not the beginning, not the middle, just the softest kind of ending. So far, you've bowed, brewed, smiled, listened. You've nearly fallen asleep to a guqin and waited 3 days for a poem that never came. Now, finally, you sit across from him again. But still, no talk of feelings, no poems sent through the window, no spontaneous confessions under lantern light. Instead, calligraphy. Because in ancient China, where feelings were often too dangerous to name aloud, romance hid itself in brushwork, in shared inkstones, delicate curves, and lines that held more meaning than anyone would ever dare say out loud. So now, it's just you and him, and a piece of rice paper between you. Let's step into this next date, and see what the brush reveals. It begins in silence. Not awkward silence. Not heavy, punishing silence. Just the kind of stillness that belongs in a scholar's study, with the faint scent of sandalwood in the air and a single paper lantern swinging gently in the summer breeze. You sit at a low writing table. He sits across from you. Between you, the tools of civilization. An inkstone, dark and oval. A brush, its tip tapered like a crane's beak. And a scroll of pure white rice paper, unrolled and weighed down at both ends with little ceramic clouds. You're supposed to copy verses today, from the Book of Songs, one of the oldest collections of poetry in existence, taught to children, memorized by scholars, recited in court. But today, the meaning isn't in the lines you copy. It's in the way you write them. He dips his brush first, draws the opening character with careful precision. Not hurried, not stiff, just exact. You watch as the brush glides, a vertical line, then a curl, a slight hook at the base. He makes it look effortless, like breathing. When he finishes the first character, he turns the brush upright again and looks at you. Your turn. You take the brush in your fingers. Let your sleeve slide back just enough to show grace, not vanity. You dip into the ink, swirl once, and hover over the paper. Then you begin your stroke, not too fast, not too proud, just steady. The first character of the next line flows out like water over stone. You finish with a modest flick. He leans closer. Your radicals are very elegant. You glance up. That's the closest he's come to flirting. You switch brushes now. He writes the third line, you the fourth. It's a quiet dance. Ink and breath. Character after character. The words are ancient, but the silence between them is yours. Somewhere near the end of the scroll, you accidentally smear a brush stroke. He doesn't comment, just takes the brush from you and begins the next line without pause. His brush lingers on the last stroke, longer than it needs to. Then he sets it down and turns the scroll just slightly toward you. You read the lines you've written together. Gentle girl, with smile so bright, draws my gaze like morning light. You pause. Your line is next. But I dare not say aloud what blossoms quietly in the cloud. You wrote that last part. He notices, says nothing, just watches the ink dry. There's a story your aunt once told you, about lovers who weren't allowed to speak openly, so they wrote letters on fans and left them in trees. You think about that now, about how every brush stroke is a kind of letter, a secret one, dressed in formality and covered in custom. Maybe this scroll will be saved. Maybe he'll keep it in a lacquered box somewhere and one day take it out and smile at the line you wrote. Or maybe it'll be burned tomorrow with incense and nobody will ever know. Either way, it's the most honest thing you've shared so far. He dips his brush again and draws a small character near the bottom corner. Not part of the poem, just a single word. You lean forward and tilt your head. Nian, to think of someone. You glance at him. He doesn't explain, just smiles, faintly, and sets the brush aside. You're not sure what to say. So you bow your head, take your brush, and answer with a character of your own. Just one. Jing, quiet. He reads it, then, softly, a good match. You smile, this time not the practiced one, a small one, real, just barely. After he leaves, you roll the scroll up carefully and return to your room. You don't hang it. You don't reread the lines. You just place it in the cedar box beneath your bed, the one with pressed jasmine flowers and scraps of old letters and a piece of red thread you once wore in your hair. Your maid raises an eyebrow. No poem last week, and now radicals and ink? You shrug. It's something. She smirks. It's something small. You close the box. But I liked it. Later, you lie in bed and trace the shape of that character on your palm with your finger. Nian. To think of, to long for. to quietly carry someone in your thoughts without saying it aloud. You wonder if that's enough. If maybe that's all love ever really was here. Not grand gestures, not swooning kisses, not loud promises under moonlight. Just one character at the edge of a scroll. And someone who noticed. By now you've probably noticed there's never really a moment where anyone says how they feel in ancient China. No bold declarations, no urgent embraces in the rain, no shouted confessions from balconies. Instead, there's a kind of gentler language. A language made of glances, pauses, silences, and sometimes prayer. Today's date isn't a date at all. You've both been sent to the temple, officially to offer incense, unofficially so the elders can observe how well-matched your auras are under divine scrutiny. But there's no hand-holding here. You'll kneel several paces apart. You won't speak. You won't even look at each other. But still, something will pass between you. Just a breath, just a shared stillness. And that might be all the closeness this culture allows. Let's step into it. You wake before dawn. The light is still blue when you're dressed in your temple robe, pale gray, simple, unadorned. Your hair is tied into a low knot, no jewels, no perfume, just a single sandalwood bead hanging from your wrist on red thread. It smells faintly of smoke and time. The carriage ride is quiet. He sits across from you, but slightly turned away, enough to be proper. He doesn't speak, neither do you. The only sound is the creaking of the cart wheels and the soft murmur of the morning cicadas beginning to stir. The temple is built high into the side of a hill. Old stone steps lead the way, uneven, worn smooth by years of feet and rain and silence. You walk them together, but not side by side. Two maidservants behind you, a chaperone in front. He walks one step ahead, and for some reason, that makes you feel less alone. At the top, the temple rises from the mist. Stone lions guard the gate. A bell tolls low in the distance. Somewhere, a monk is sweeping fallen petals from the walkway with a broom made of bamboo. You inhale deeply. Incense, pine, morning dew. It smells like reverence. Inside, the temple is dim and cool. Candles flicker. The floor is smooth stone. A low altar sits beneath the golden statue of Guanyin, the bodhisattva of mercy. Her face is serene. Her hands are folded in blessing. You each take 3 sticks of incense. He lights his first. Then you light yours. The scent curls upward in soft spirals. You both bow low, together, but not in time. Then you kneel, facing the altar. He is 3 cushions to your left. You can't see his face, only his outline, lit by the flicker of gold. You close your eyes, offer your prayer. You whisper it quietly in your mind, unsure if the gods care for whispers or if they've grown tired of hearing the same hopes over and over again from girls who never get to choose their futures. Still, you pray. Not for marriage, not for love, not even for him exactly. Just for clarity, for something real, for a moment that feels honest in a world so full of ceremony. You peek sideways, just slightly, and see him with his head bowed. Still, unmoving. You wonder what he's praying for, if his wish is like yours, if it has your name in it, or if he's thinking of duty and not desire. You look back to the altar. The bell rings again, low and echoing. You bow once more. Place your incense into the golden ash bowl. It stands upright in a small cluster of other sticks, each one still releasing its fragrant smoke like tiny wandering ghosts. You stand. He stands. You do not speak. In the outer courtyard, the sun has begun to rise fully now. The stone glows gold. He walks beside you, this time not one step ahead, just beside. Not too close, but not distant either. You walk slowly. You pretend not to notice how his hand swings just slightly near yours. Neither of you reaches. But something lingers in the air between you. Not tension, not electricity. just the warm weight of almost. Near the koi pond, a monk offers you both cups of barley tea. You sit on opposite benches. The tea is warm. You sip quietly. A single dragonfly hovers near the surface of the water, landing briefly on a floating leaf. He speaks softly. My grandmother asked what I prayed for. You look up. And? I told her I couldn't say. You hold your tea steady. He doesn't look at you. You wait a moment, then say, my prayer was very short. He nods, and nothing else is said. On the way back down the temple steps, he offers you his arm, just briefly, when you stumble slightly on a loose stone. You don't take it, but you smile at him, and he smiles back, and somehow that's more intimate than anything you've done so far. That night in your room, your robe still smells faintly of incense. You light a small candle, take out your calligraphy brush, and write a single character on a scrap of rice paper. Yuan wish. You fold it twice, slip it under your pillow. Not because it will come true, but because, for the first time, it felt like he might have wished it too. By now, you've shared calligraphy, temple smoke, long silences, and tea. Each time, the moments got a little softer, not quite clearer, not exactly louder, but maybe a bit warmer. Like sunlight that doesn't announce itself, just shows up on your sleeve. Today's outing is louder than the rest. You weren't expecting a date. You weren't expecting him. You were just supposed to visit the spring market with your aunt. Browse silk dyes. Pick a fabric or two for the festival robe you'll be expected to wear. A chore more than a pleasure. But somehow, he's there too. And for once, there's no performance, no cushion to kneel on, no scroll to unroll, no grandmother hovering behind a screen. Just the market, the noise, the smells, the chaos of spring, and a moment where two people reach for the same color at the same time and realize they were thinking of each other without meaning to. Let's step into it. The market is loud today. Not rude exactly, just full of voices, footsteps, laughter, shouts. Vendors line both sides of the path, calling out the virtues of their spices, their roots, their fabric bolts, their polished combs and rice sweets. Children weave between carts. Wind chimes clink lazily in the breeze. The air smells like orange blossom, steamed buns, and freshly dyed silk. Your aunt points out stall after stall. This one sells the best indigo. That one ruined my last robe. Don't bother. You nod, listen, follow. You're wrapped in a simple outer robe today, cream, unpatterned, meant for travel. No jewelry, no makeup. For once, you are just you. Then you see him, across the lane, standing in front of a stall of inkstones and dyed threads, talking softly to someone, probably his uncle or maybe a steward. You weren't told he'd be here. He sees you at the same moment. There's no bow, no greeting, just a glance, that glimmer of not quite smiling recognition. And then, politely, you both go back to pretending you're here for entirely unrelated reasons, which is, of course, completely unconvincing. Your aunt waves him over. Of course she does. He bows, greets her warmly, says something about the abundance of the spring season. She replies with some nonsense about auspicious silk. You are too busy pretending to look at bolts of fabric to be pulled into the performance. And then, without planning, the three of you begin browsing together. A strange little procession, your aunt in front, narrating everything she touches, and you and him just slightly behind, occasionally near enough to brush sleeves, but never quite. The dye merchant has laid out dozens of silks, all different shades of blue, some nearly gray, some so rich they look like lapis stone, some with a violet tint, others that catch the light with a sheen like water under moonlight. Your aunt picks up a bolt of bright robin's egg blue. This would suit you, she says. You smile. It's too cheerful, too loud. You finger the edge politely. Then, to your left, you hear his voice. I prefer this one. He holds up a length of silk so deep and soft it's almost stormy. Your fingers freeze, because that was the one you were about to reach for. You glance at him. Just briefly. He's still looking at the silk. But he knows. You know he knows. Your hand hovers over the fabric. Then, deliberately, you both touch the same bolt at the same time. Your aunt chuckles. Oh, the same taste. Well, that's convenient. You both drop your hands, not abruptly, not guiltily, just quietly. He says nothing. Neither do you. But something unspoken has just happened, something so small it might have gone unnoticed, except for the way your breath changed. You feel warm now, not from the sun, from the quiet thrill of not needing to explain anything. Later, you move past the dye stalls to where the spices are sold. Your aunt is bartering for cinnamon bark. He stands beside you, just far enough not to seem improper, just close enough to say something only you will hear. Would you wear that color? You pause. I think, maybe. He nods. I imagined it already. You look up. He's not smiling, but his voice is warm. Not loud, not proud, just gently certain. And then your aunt calls your name. The moment is over, but it lingers. In your wrist, in the space between your hands, in the memory of blue silk, soft as clouds before a spring storm. That evening, you press the fabric sample into your mirror box. Your maid watches you carefully smooth it down. Did you buy it? You shake your head. Not yet. Then why save the piece? You fold it once. I want to remember what it looked like. She shrugs. Looks like blue to me. But she doesn't press. That night you dream of colors, not clothes, not robes, just shades of light, shifting from water to sky to rain to the blue of his voice when he said he imagined it on you. You don't even remember what he was wearing, you just remember that color, and that you reached for it first. Inside this gentle, quiet courtship that barely calls itself that, you've knelt in temples, played games with color, traded verses and radical strokes on rice paper. And now, something more direct. Not dramatic, not loud, not reckless. Just a small bundle of words etched into bamboo, delivered with formality, read in silence, and kept secret. In ancient China, letters weren't folded into heart shapes or sprinkled with perfume. They weren't hidden in drawers or fluttered out of windows. They were carved into bamboo slips, small, flat pieces bound together with silk string, rolled like a scroll. Precious, fragile, and permanent. He writes you now. Not because he's allowed to, but because the words won't stay in his mouth anymore. Let's go there. The first bundle arrives late, not during the morning bustle or the evening tea, but at that soft, in-between hour just after the lanterns have been lit and just before the house falls completely silent. Your maid slips into your room holding something in both hands, wrapped carefully in a cotton cloth. She doesn't smile, just says, "For you." From someone who didn't sign his name. You already know who it is. She places it on your desk. The bamboo is pale yellow, the string crimson. 7 slips tied together like an accordion of thoughts. You don't touch it at first. You just stare at it, as if it might vanish if you breathe wrong. You light a fresh candle, sit down slowly, and untie the string. The slips fall open like little doors, each one etched in neat, confident brushstrokes, not hurried, not stiff, just measured. The first line. I dreamed last night of the river and you were standing on the other bank, looking away. Still, I knew you were waiting. You read it twice. Your heart doesn't race. It tightens. The second slip. You left your fingerprint on the blue silk I pretended not to keep. You close your eyes. You remember the feel of that fabric, the way your hands had touched, the warmth in the air, that quiet sense of being seen, without fanfare, without noise. Third slip. Do you still write characters at night, even when no one is watching? Fourth. I think of the temple, of how your sleeves didn't move when the wind passed. You were so still. I tried to pray for patience. I failed. You press your fingers to your lips, then gently turn the next slip. 5th, I didn't send a poem before. I didn't know if I was allowed to mean it. 6th, this isn't a poem either, just thoughts that won't sit quietly anymore. And the last, if I see you again before summer ends, I won't say anything, but you'll know. You don't cry, you don't smile. You just sit there with your candle flickering low and the slips spread open like pieces of your chest you didn't know were missing. Then, carefully, you fold them back together and tuck them beneath the edge of your pillow. The next day, you are the same. You say nothing. You stitch your embroidery like nothing is different. You eat your pickled radish without complaint. You answer your aunt's questions in full, respectful sentences. Your face stays calm, but your fingers are unsteady. Days pass. Then another bundle arrives. This one is smaller, 5 slips, tied with a darker string. The first one reads, I saw a cloud shaped like your silence. You laugh, quietly, to yourself. And then, like a fool, you look out the window, as if clouds could possibly mean anything. The second, I almost spoke your name aloud yesterday. Almost. The third, I wrote it instead, on a leaf. I let the wind carry it. The fourth, I don't know if this is love, but I know it is constant. And the fifth, are your hands warm tonight? You place your hands in your lap. They are. You wonder if he knew that somehow. You do not reply. You are not allowed to. Girls don't send letters, but every night, after everyone is asleep, you take out the slips, line them on your desk, and read them by candlelight like a ritual. Each time your face stays calm, but your chest feels less empty, like something's growing inside it. Small, like moss, but steady. Your maid, of course, knows. She doesn't ask what's written, but one night, as she brushes your hair, she mutters, You're quieter lately. You blink. I've always been quiet. No, she says. Now it's a different kind of quiet. She doesn't explain. You don't ask. But she tucks the hairpin in more gently than usual that night. The third bundle arrives a week later. It contains just 3 slips. First, this will be the last for now. You pause. Your heart skips once. Second, I have said what I can say. Anything more would be unwise, but I carry you with me even when I speak to no one. Third, when the chrysanthemums bloom, I'll look for you in the garden. You touch the edge of the bamboo and nod, once, to no one. That night, you do something foolish. You write one word on a scrap of cloth and press it into your mirror box. You will never send it. But it's a reply, the word tongue together, even if you never are. Your love story has been made of everything except love. Brush strokes, teacups, silence, a temple prayer, a shared shade of silk. Bamboo slips with words you can't say aloud. But today, you're out in the open. Not together, not alone, but near enough that you can hear the sound of his sleeves brushing the side of the boat as he rows. This isn't a secret meeting, it's a spring group outing, the kind where families pretend not to be watching and eligible daughters are lined up in their best spring robes. The peach blossoms are in full bloom, and somewhere in the middle of it all, you're floating on a narrow painted boat, trying not to look directly at him while the water swirls gently below. Let's begin. The invitations arrived a week ago. Peach blossom outing, your aunt had read aloud. How elegant, good for your complexion. You said nothing, but your chest ached a little, because you knew he'd be there, and you didn't know if he'd speak to you. Or worse, if he wouldn't. The morning is warm. Your robe is pale pink silk with a woven pattern of falling petals. No jewelry today except for a tiny golden clasp shaped like a crane. Your hair is coiled loosely at your neck. You don't look in the mirror for long. You already know the expression on your face. Too hopeful. The gathering spot is a willow-lined bank by the river, where a few red and green painted boats are tied up near the shore. Dozens of others are already there, cousins, friends, scholar families, even one minor official with a booming voice. You spot him from across the water. He's helping someone adjust a small parasol on one of the boats. Laughing politely, his sleeves rolled up slightly for the task. You look away before he sees you, but your chest feels a little warmer now. When it's time to board, the guests are gently sorted, not by accident, not really, but with that practiced art of polite arrangement that every aunt and matchmaker has trained in since birth. You end up in the same boat. Of course. So does your younger cousin, two family friends, and an older chaperone who's already fussing with a basket of peaches. He's asked to row. Naturally, no servant, just him, seated near the back, lifting the oar in smooth, slow arcs. You sit at the front, close enough to hear the ripple of water, far enough to pretend not to. The boat pushes away from shore. The surface of the river is glassy, disturbed only by the slow pull of his strokes and the occasional petal that lands, trembles, and drifts. The peach trees lean over the banks like gossiping ants. Their blossoms fall with the wind, gently, like sighs. Your cousin points at the petals. So many, she says, catching one in her palm. You nod, but you're not watching the petals. You're watching the space just behind the boat, where the water parts and swirls from his oar, where circles stretch outward and vanish into quiet. That's the part he touches. That's what he changes. Someone passes you a small clay cup of plum wine. You sip slowly. Your fingers tremble a little. You hope no one sees. Across from you, he hasn't said a word. But every few moments, his gaze flicks to the left, not at you, near you, and then back to the water. The silence is louder than any conversation. But somehow, it feels kind. The boat drifts into a quieter bend in the river. The chatter from the other boats fades into distance. Birds flit between the trees. The air is thick with scent. Sweet blossoms, damp wood, old spring sunlight. Then you hear him hum, just once. A tune barely formed, low, soft, the way someone hums when their hands are busy and their mind is somewhere else. It's a melody you don't recognize, but you hold your breath, as if catching it might mean something. You dare a glance. His eyes meet yours for the first time today. It's not long. A half second. Enough. The chaperone begins fussing over the peach basket again. Your cousin starts describing a dream she had about riding a phoenix, but your eyes drift back to the water, to the slow ripples moving behind you. And in your mind, you hear his last bamboo slip. When the chrysanthemums bloom, I'll look for you in the garden. You wonder if he meant the boat, if this is his garden, and you are the bloom. Eventually, the boat circles back toward shore. Everyone applauds the petals. The chaperone says it's good luck that so many landed on the deck. You glance down. There's one caught in the fold of your sleeve. You leave it there. As you step off the boat, he doesn't offer his hand. Too improper, but you pass close enough that your sleeves brush for a second. You don't say thank you. He doesn't say goodbye. But as you walk away, you feel something in your palm. You open it. It's a thin sliver of bamboo, not a full letter, just one slip, with one character etched in delicate strokes, due to cross. You don't look back, but you don't let go of it either. You remember the boat, the painted green sides, the shimmer of the oar, the petal that landed in your sleeve. And you remember the word etched on bamboo, wata, to cross, as if a choice had been made or a quiet confession had been offered. But nothing is ever truly quiet in a garden full of aunties. In ancient China, even the softest footstep leaves behind echoes, and unfortunately, someone was always listening. The rumors don't begin with scandal. They begin with concern, and soon that stolen glance across the river becomes a full-blown tale. edited, exaggerated, and politely mourned over with dramatic sighs and too much jasmine tea. Let's step into that. It starts 2 mornings after the boat ride. Your mother calls you into the West Pavilion. She's seated upright, tea untouched, hairpin glinting with a stone you've never seen before. Her brows are calm, but her fingers twist her handkerchief around the same corner over and over again. Your stomach knots. There is a certain stillness in the air that always comes before someone says your name too softly. She gestures for you to kneel. You obey. She says only, "Did he speak to you?" You don't ask who she means. You just keep your eyes lowered. She exhales and says nothing else. The next day, you're not allowed into the garden, not because you're ill, but because your aunt is resting nearby. Somehow, everyone is always resting nearby these days. Even when you sit in your room doing embroidery, the silence feels suspicious, like someone is listening just outside the wall. Later that week, you hear your name again, not from family, but from your younger cousin who whispers it with too much glee. "We heard you shared a peach on the boat." You blink. "A peach?" She nods furiously. "He peeled it for you." You laugh, once, softly. You didn't even eat a peach that day. But the story has grown legs now, and it's running faster than you can catch. The chaperone has apparently reported a prolonged silence between the two of you, which, in any other world, would mean nothing. But here, prolonged silence might as well be a secret kiss. One afternoon, as you pass through the garden to fetch silk thread, you overhear 2 aunties bent over a tea table. One says, "Well, it's not improper, but it's certainly eager." The other replies, "Her sleeves are too loose. That's always how it starts." You step lightly, pretend you heard nothing, but the words cling to your back like shadows. That night, your mother visits you in your room. She doesn't sit, just scans your writing desk, sees the incense ash, the brush holder, the folded cloth from the dye market. Her eyes settle on the mirror box. You say nothing. She doesn't open it. She just says, "You are very young, and youth doesn't last long." Then she leaves. The candle crackles after the door closes. You stare at it until it dies. The next morning, your mirror box is gone. No explanation, no confrontation, just gone. You say nothing. Not to your maid, not to your aunt, not even to yourself. The bamboo slips aren't in the mirror box, though. You moved them weeks ago when the dreams started to feel too vivid. They're safe. Under the floorboard behind the incense table, you check once, just to be sure. You don't open them. You just run your hand over the cool wood and whisper, "Still mine." By the end of the week, he hasn't been seen. Not at the market, not at the temple, not even at the poetry gathering your cousin's fiancé hosted, where he was expected to recite something memorized from the Book of Songs. One auntie says he's traveling with his uncle. Another says he's ill from the spring damp. Your maid tells you the truth in a whisper. He's been told to wait, told not to write, told to consider his future with greater clarity. You nod. Of course he has, because no one's love is their own here. It belongs to the house, the name, the matchmaker's scroll. One afternoon, your cousin passes you a note, scribbled quickly on rice paper and tucked into a bolt of brocade. It says, "They say you're not speaking anymore. I wonder if that means I've already said too much." There's no name. There doesn't need to be. You burn it before sunset. Spring festivals come and go. You wear your dyed robe, the one in the same blue you both chose. But it feels different now. He's not there. You don't look for him, not because you've stopped hoping, but because hope takes too much energy now. You save that for walking, for breathing, for keeping your face calm while the aunties watch your every blink. The petal from the boat ride? You pressed it into your mirror before it was taken. Now it sits folded in a piece of silk hidden inside your pillow lining. You touch it sometimes, not to remember him, just to remind yourself that it happened. The word they use now: improper, not scandalous, not shameful, just not suitable for a girl of your rank and purpose. You're still invited to family dinners, still given new embroidery thread, still praised for your poise, but your name has changed in their mouths. It's not a name anymore. It's a rumor. He doesn't write again. You understand. There's no room for bamboo slips now. The boat has floated away. The water has closed. But still, some nights, as you drift to sleep, you imagine him sitting somewhere with an oar in his hands, listening to nothing but the sound of petals falling on water. You imagine he never let go of that word he gave you, do, to cross. Even if he never does, you've come so far in this story without ever really moving, from behind a folding screen, to a garden, to a boat, and then backward again, back into silence, back into your room, back behind the walls of what a girl must do. It's strange, isn't it? How still love can be, how it never shouts, never demands, it only waits. And tonight, you're waiting. Not because you believe he'll come, but because, if you don't wait, it means there's nothing left to hope for. So you slip your feet into embroidered silk slippers, step to the gate quietly, and stand there, just long enough to call it trying. Let's return to you now. It's summer now. The gardens smell different, deeper, greener, heavier. The sun stays longer and the shadows are slower to cool. You've done your hair twice already tonight. Once the way your mother taught you, parted, sleek, pinned with jade, and once again the way your maid suggested, softer with loose curls at the temple, like the way the court ladies wear theirs in the festival murals. Neither looks right. Neither looks wrong. You leave it half done. Tonight wasn't meant for ceremony anyway. You're not supposed to be near the gate. The outer walk is for the steward, the servants, the men. Your world stops at the second courtyard wall, but tonight, you walk past it, softly, in silk slippers stitched with gold chrysanthemums, a gift from your grandmother for last year's festival. You've never worn them outside. They aren't meant for walking. They're meant to be seen. But you don't care. You walk anyway. The gate is tall, red wood, carved with swirling clouds and lotus motifs, edged with black iron studs. It's locked. Of course it is, but you knew that. You don't touch it. You just sit near it. A little bench, tucked beneath the shadow of the eaves, where the moonlight doesn't quite reach. And you wait. Your maid is the only one who knows. She followed, of course. She didn't speak. Just handed you a lantern and said, "For the mosquitoes." You held it close as you walked. Now it rests on the ground beside your feet, flickering softly like it's afraid to shine too bright. You don't know why you came. You're not foolish. He was told not to come. You were told not to see him. There were no promises made. No plans whispered behind fans. No secret rendezvous. Still, you thought, just maybe, he'd disobey everything for one quiet look through the bars of the gate. One last moment to prove the slips of bamboo weren't just poetry practice, but the gate stays closed. The hinges don't groan. The gravel doesn't crunch. The silence doesn't break. You fold your hands in your lap. Your sleeves slip down your forearms. The candle inside your lantern flickers again, lower this time. You wonder where he is. Maybe still in the Capitol. Maybe at the examination hall, preparing for a future you're not allowed to be in. Maybe writing another slip that he'll never send. Or maybe, no, you stop yourself, because thinking maybe has already cost you too many nights. A breeze stirs the trees. A single magnolia petal floats down and lands on the step. You stare at it. Try to remember the boat, the blossom in your sleeve, the slip in your hand. Do. To cross. Tonight you've crossed all you can. From your room, to the outer wall, to the bench near the gate. And still, he doesn't come. You stand. The slippers feel stiff now, as if they've remembered they were made for display, not for pacing in the dirt. You dust off your robe, pick up the lantern, But you don't turn back just yet. You look at the gate one more time, and you say, not aloud, but in your head, the words you never got to send. I would have waited longer. But no one taught me how to wait without disappearing, even after the sound of hooves fades into summer heat. Even after the last servant mutters something about the dust. You stay because leaving is never just about walking. It's about everything that stays behind. That evening, you're quiet at dinner. Your mother doesn't ask why. Your aunt doesn't speak your name. Only your grandmother glances at you and says, "Sometimes the smart ones leave early." You don't answer, because you don't feel smart. You feel like a page that was never written on. Clean, untouched, useless. On that night, you open the floorboard behind your incense table. The bamboo slips are still there. You don't read them. You just run your fingers across the edges. They feel cooler than you remembered. Later, by candlelight, you open your mirror. The new one, not the old one they took. You place a single thread of gold beside it, not to symbolize anything, just because it's the color of leaving. You dream of the boat again, not the one with blossoms, but one smaller, plain wood, rocking slowly, drifting out of sight. You're not on it. You're standing on the shore. This time, you don't wave. You just bow your head and let the ripples pass over your feet. By now you already know, this isn't the kind of story where love wins, or where someone runs through the rain, or where letters arrive just in time. This is a quieter story, one where love is buried beneath good manners, where longing is folded into red silk, and where happiness is measured by how well a girl endures what's been chosen for her. You said goodbye through a window. You watched him walk the eastern road toward the capital exams. You stayed, and not long after, a new name arrived in your courtyard. Not his, but a name your family liked more suitable, more stable, more approved. And so, one morning, you wake up, and the marriage preparations have begun. Let's go there now. The first thing they tell you? He's kind, not handsome, not brilliant, not even particularly interesting, but kind, as if kindness is something you'll notice after your name changes. You nod politely when they mention it. You don't ask for details. You don't ask for anything, because the asking part of you left with him. The second thing they tell you? The marriage will be fast, not rushed. No one would call it that, but quick enough that no rumors can catch up. Your robe fittings are already scheduled. The red lacquer boxes have already arrived, and your aunt is already sketching flower arrangements onto rice paper, her brush making soft, circular shapes like little whirlpools. You sit beside her and embroider cranes, but your fingers feel slower now, as if even they have lost interest in pretending. Your fiancé is introduced once, briefly, in the front hall. He bows, says your name properly, smiles. You bow too. You don't smile, but you don't cry either, which your mother takes as a sign of grace. The wedding robe is red, of course, 3 layers, each heavier than the one beneath it. The outer silk is embroidered with gold lotuses and a double fish pattern that symbolizes harmony. But you feel more like a painting than a person, a symbol of someone else's success. Not a girl, not a bride, just proof that the matchmaker was right. The morning of the wedding, your maid braids your hair slowly. It's the first time she's touched your hair since the night you waited by the gate. She doesn't say anything about that night. She just ties the braid with a red cord, smooths your sleeves, and murmurs, "I wish it could have been different." You look in the mirror, not at yourself, at the emptiness behind your eyes. You nod and say, "Me too." The ceremony is long. First, the incense, then the bows, then the ancestral offerings, then the tea. You kneel more times than you speak. You drink tea before you've even seen the room you'll live in. You smile at his mother. She says your hands are elegant. You want to tell her they're empty. But instead, you bow again. The feast is loud. Laughter rolls through the courtyard like thunder. Musicians pluck at stringed instruments you don't recognize. Someone sings a poem about moonlight and perfect wives. Someone else cries from too much wine. Your cousins tease each other. The matchmaker is glowing. And you? You sit beside your new husband and say nothing because your heart is too quiet to hear itself speak. You're told to retire early. The bedroom is draped in red silk, from the ceiling to the foot of the bed. There's a tray of candied lotus seeds on the low table, a carved box of hairpins, a poem inscribed on the wall in gold ink. You don't read it. You don't taste the sweets. You just sit at the edge of the bed, hands folded, waiting for the part where your old self is supposed to disappear. He enters. Your new husband. He doesn't touch you. He doesn't rush. He just sits near the window, says something about how warm the weather is, and offers you a cup of chrysanthemum tea. You return inside. Your maid says nothing, just helps you change out of your robe, unties your slippers, unpins your hair. She doesn't ask what you saw, and you don't say that you saw nothing, because what you really saw was the shape of a life that doesn't belong to you anymore. That night, as you lie in bed, you wonder something strange. You wonder if he waited too. Not at your gate, but somewhere else. His own wall, his own bench, his own silence. And maybe he thought you would come. And maybe you both waited at separate gates. And no one crossed, because the world never meant for you to meet in the middle. The next morning, you wake up early. Your slippers are already dusted. Your mirror box has not returned. The bamboo slips remain hidden behind the incense table, untouched. But now, your pillow smells like smoke, from the candle that burned too low while you waited. A tiny black mark, singed at the corner, like a scar that never asked for a story. You don't visit the gate again, but sometimes you walk near it, not to wait, just to remember that you once did, and that someone, for a brief season, made you foolish enough to hope. It's strange how the heart counts time, not by days or seasons, but by the moments when someone leaves. This is one of those moments. He's not coming to see you. You're not going to meet him, but you both know this is the end of something, or the pause before an even longer silence. The capital exams are noble, prestigious. Every mother in town dreams of hearing her son's name read aloud by a court official. Every family pins their legacy to that moment. But for you, the exams mean something else. They mean distance. They mean farewell. They mean that everything you almost had is being packed into a traveling trunk and carried down the eastern road. And the only part of you that gets to follow is your eyes. Let's go there now. The house is unusually busy this morning. Servants clatter through the courtyard with bamboo baskets. Horses shuffle near the outer wall. An ox cart waits just beyond the gate, its wheels already dusty. Your window is barely cracked open, not wide enough to be seen, just enough to hear. And below, somewhere in the courtyard, he's preparing to leave. You haven't seen him in weeks. Not since the gossip began. Not since the petals fell. Not since the night you waited at the gate in silk slippers that still sit scuffed at the back of your wardrobe. But you know his footsteps. You hear them now. Measured. Calm. Like he's practiced walking away. You kneel at the window, careful to keep your shadow small. There's no curtain. Only a slatted screen, just enough to blur your presence if someone looks up. But no one does. No one ever looks up. They're too busy saying things like, "Send word when you reach the southern river." Your uncle's scroll is in the third trunk. Don't forget. Write immediately if the inn charges extra for boiled water again. And from one of the older men, remember, pass this time or marry instead. Laughter follows. You don't. He's dressed in travel robes, not formal, not embroidered, just soft gray linen with a darker sash. His hair is bound simply, no scholar's cap yet. That will come later, once he's inside the walls of the Capitol and under the gaze of real officials. But still, He looks like he's already half gone. He doesn't look up. You weren't expecting him to. But it still hurts. You want to reach for something, a slip of bamboo, a silk ribbon, a word, anything. To tie this moment to something more than just air. But there's nothing to reach for. You never had much to begin with. Only half steps, only glances, only dreams that couldn't cross courtyards without being turned into stories. Your maid speaks from the doorway, softly. He's leaving now. You nod. Still kneeling, still watching. The servants begin loading the final boxes. You count them, not because it matters, but because it's the only way to make time hold still. 7 boxes, 2 scroll tubes, 1 brush case wrapped in yellow cloth, and 1 folded fan, white silk, tucked into his sash. You remember the fan. He had it during the zither recital. You wonder if he remembers that too. The ox cart creaks as the driver pulls the reins. He steps back, bowing slightly to his uncle, then to the steward. Someone hands him a small charm, probably for safe travel. You can't see which god it's dedicated to. And then he turns, for one brief second, toward the main house, toward your window. You don't breathe. His eyes don't rise, but his hands pause, then move again, and he walks toward the road. You stay at the window long after he's gone, even after the gate shuts. You take it, you drink, you thank him. He says, "I'll be patient." You nod. He says, "I know I'm not the one you waited for." And then he looks away. You sleep facing the wall, your hands curled under your cheek like you used to when you were a girl, before all of this. You think about the bamboo slips, still hidden behind the incense table in your old room. You think about the petal in your pillow. You think about the folding screen, and the boat, and the slip of bamboo with the word dough, to cross. And you think, you never did. In the morning, no one asks how you slept. No one expects you to say much. You are, after all, a married woman now. Your new name is recorded in the household registry. Your old name, the one he used in his slips, fades quietly from memory. No one ever says it again the same way, but you keep moving, because that's what girls do here. You nod at the right times. You bow when needed. You answer his mother with soft syllables and pour tea without spilling. Everyone calls you graceful. What they mean is, you don't complain. One evening, your new husband returns home with a gift. A mirror box, red lacquer, carved with birds. You smile faintly. Say thank you. But that night, when you open it, it feels wrong. Too polished, too empty. So you slip one of your own threads of gold inside, and close it again. That thread is the only part of you that still belongs to you. It's winter now, not the harsh kind, not biting or cruel, but soft. Still, the kind of cold that wraps itself around your sleeves and lingers in the air like a memory. The kind that makes plum blossoms bloom early. You didn't expect them, these blossoms. Not this season, not this year, not this late in life. But here they are, delicate and defiant, pale pink against bare branches, falling like snow from the edge of the old courtyard wall. You watch them now from a stone path in someone else's garden. This isn't your family's estate. It isn't even yours. It belongs to a relative of your husband's, a quiet man, newly promoted, celebrating with poetry and wine. You didn't want to attend. You rarely do these days. But your mother-in-law insisted. And so you came. You came with a proper robe. You came with your hair pinned high. You came with a name no one ever mispronounces anymore. And yet, you also came with a sliver of quiet stillness tucked deep in your sleeves. The same kind of stillness you felt behind the screen. The same kind you carried on the boat. The same kind that settled over your chest the morning he left for the capital. And now, today, without warning, that stillness stirs. Because he's here. You don't see him first. You feel him. that small shift in the space around you, like something once forgotten has been placed gently back on the shelf of your awareness. You glance up. He's across the garden, speaking to one of the older uncles, nodding respectfully, sleeves folded properly. His hair is threaded with gray now, his stance more careful. But the way he holds his hands, still the same, like he's balancing something fragile between his fingers, even when empty-handed. You haven't seen him in years, more than 10, maybe 15. Not since the day you watched him disappear through the eastern gate. And now? Now he turns, and his eyes meet yours. It's not dramatic. No one gasps, no one freezes, no one drops their teacup. The air doesn't ripple, the blossoms don't stop falling, but something inside you quiets, the same way it did that night behind the screen, when you first heard him recite a line of poetry and thought, he says things like they mean something. Now, standing beneath a winter plum tree, he bows, not deeply, not stiffly, just enough to say, I remember. You nod, not dramatically, not coldly, just enough to say, so do I. You don't move closer, neither does he. There's too much formality here, too many cousins, too many eyes that might remember who you were back then. But your eyes stay locked for 1 second longer than politeness allows. And in that second, you're 17 again, hands folded in your lap while someone plays the guccine. You're 19, slipping a pressed petal into your pillow. You're 22, kneeling behind a window, watching the only boy you ever waited for walk away. And now you're older, and he's older, and the waiting is long over. But somehow, the date never ended. Later, after the wine and the formalities, after you've said your goodbyes and stepped away from the garden, you pause by the path where the plum blossoms still fall. Your maid waits behind you, respectfully silent. You reach out, gently, almost absent-mindedly, and let a blossom land in your palm. It's cold, lighter than breath. You don't cry, you don't smile, you just close your hand around it and walk home. That night, when the house is quiet, you open your mirror box, the one with the red lacquer birds, gifted by your husband years ago. Inside, there's still that one golden thread. It's frayed now, but still whole. You lift it, then reach behind your incense table, where the hidden compartment holds the last of the bamboo slips. Still unread, you run your fingers across the oldest one. No need to open it. You remember what it said. You always did. To cross. You don't believe in destiny anymore. You don't believe in timing or fate, or that people are meant for each other across lifetimes. But you do believe in echoes. And today, when he bowed beneath falling blossoms and you nodded beneath silence, it felt like an echo coming home. Not a reunion, not a rekindling, just recognition. Somewhere in the capital, he has a family of his own. You've heard he teaches now, essays, calligraphy, the analects. You've heard he is patient with his students, generous with his words, kind to his wife. You're glad for her. You don't envy her, because you had the better part of him, the part that was full of not-yets and maybe-soons, the part that waited on boats and behind doors and inside the wrist movements of tea ceremonies, the part that almost was, and that's the part that stays. The date didn't end, it simply paused, folded into silk, pressed between petals, written on slips, and carried, softly, gently, in your quiet heart all these years. As you lie in bed, the window cracked to the cold. You hear the wind stir the plum branches again. One petal lands on your sill. You don't reach for it. You don't need to. You've carried enough of them already. And now it's time to sleep. The end. But not really. Not for her. Not for him. Not for you. Because some stories don't close. They just fall, one soft petal at a time. And that's the end of tonight's story. Not the kind with a happy ending, not even the kind with a sad one. Just a quiet one, the kind that lingers. A story of two people who never held hands, who never confessed anything out loud, but who still remembered each other every time the plum blossoms fell. Because sometimes love doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be carried, softly, through the years. If this story helped you wind down tonight, I'd be so grateful if you left a like or a comment. Maybe tell me where you're listening from, or what part of the story stayed with you the most. And if you enjoy these slow, beautiful journeys through history, you might want to subscribe for more sleep stories just like this one. Quiet stories, soft stories, stories that don't rush but walk beside you all the way into sleep. Until next time, sleep well.